Hi, Karen.
Hi, Zalman. Can you hear me?
I hear you, but your voice and your lips are sort of off somehow. Can you talk again?
Yeah, that would be not very good.
Now
Am I
you,
still off?
yeah, no, it's perfect now.
Okay,
I
good.
think it took a second for it to just connect.
Okay, great. So I am going to open my PowerPoint here and
Great.
see if that is. Okay.
Are you able to
John?
give me 1 second? What I'm going to do is I'm going to make you a host.
Okay.
And I think that will enable you to have more.
Then I can open it.
You should be able to check now.
Okay.
I just made you into a co-host.
Okay. Oh, and maybe I have to press the share button or something.
I think on the bottom of the screen, there should be a green button that says share screen.
Yes. Okay, I see you. Oh, and now this looks like my PowerPoint with the message saying that I couldn't do it. Let's
Okay.
see what happens if I. No, well, I don't want that. Let's see if. I'm going to close that and open it again. Okay.
Was Razy able to walk you through it the last time?
Yes, and it worked beautifully.
Okay.
Sorry, it's still saying it can't read it.
Okay, give me 1 second. See if we can get Razy to come on.
Sure. Maybe I hit share again.
Yeah, Karen needs some help with getting her PowerPoint working.
It says screen sharing has failed to start. The window you selected is invalid.
Could you please come upstairs, Raze?
Yeah, I'm coming up right now.
Thanks. Bye. Hopefully Razy will be able to solve this. She's more of the.
And I'm going to get my tech support too. I'll be right back. John? John?
I sent out tons of text messages today.
Can you send that now? She needs your help.
Okay, what can I do?
She just went to get John, see if maybe he can. Can you send messages to everybody?
I just did. I did today. An hour ago.
Right, starting now.
Begging.
We're going to be starting in just about 2 minutes. We got some technical challenges. We should be able to figure it out. Raze, can you help out Karen?
Yes.
So should I hit the share button again?
Yes. Yeah. Is it working or is it telling you that you can't share? Is that the issue?
It's telling me I can't share.
Okay, so give me a second.
Let me close that box and I'll hit the green button at the bottom again.
Hold on 1 sec. Okay, now go for it.
Okay. And now I'm going to open my PowerPoint and see if it shows up.
Great.
Nope,
Raze?
It's not working?
it's not working.
What's it telling you?
Oh, wait, what if I hit this little
There
share
you
button?
go. Yep.
When it
Yep.
says
Yep.
click open Zoom meetings. Oh, so I have to,
Yeah, just
I have
change.
to launch again?
No. You're on Zoom. Just go
I'm
to
on
your
Zoom.
PowerPoint now. We see your screen. Just click your
Okay.
PowerPoint.
Okay. It's still saying it won't open it.
Well, I see whatever you're doing on your computer right now.
Okay, so I'm closing this. I see, I have a little box with me and Zalman and Gary, and then I see the Zoom box.
Perfect. So
But-
minimize the screen that you see right now. Click the minimize.
Yes. Now I'll open PowerPoint again,
Exactly.
and you see that.
I
But
see your screen.
But it's, so you see the little box that says, sorry, it won't read it.
That's something on you with your computer's end, not, it doesn't seem like a Zoom issue.
Hi, honey, I'm having trouble launching PowerPoint on this meeting. Okay, I'm calling my tech support. John will be right here.
We're going to be starting in just a couple of minutes. We're just trying to get all of the technical.
Sorry, everybody. We actually, Racy and I went to the trouble of going through this earlier this week, and it was perfect.
Yeah.
Always seems to work that way. But good to see you, Saul. Good to see you, Elon.
Yes. And
And good to see you, Gary.
Good to see you guys.
Thank you for joining us.
so I'm sharing the screen, and they can see my screen, but when I try to open PowerPoint, I get this error box.
Oh, it's not on D. That was your USB.
Oh, okay. I'm opening the wrong thing. Okay.
Happens to the best of us.
So I'll close it again.
Well, you can just go to PowerPoint
Oops.
and do file open.
Oh. Okay.
I know. We're going to be starting in just a minute here.
Okay. So it's.
Sounds good.
it's
Sounds
here.
good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. There it is. But I don't want it in that mode.
Yeah. So, do you want slideshow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody beginning now.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Great. We're on.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to do a quick short intro before you get started. In the meantime, we're just getting ourselves, I didn't want this conversation going live on Facebook while we were getting the technical side of things. So I'm going to launch Facebook Live. So we have it over there at the same time. Jewish combat photographer in World War II. Okay, go live. Okay. Anyone that's seeing this on Facebook, please let us know that you can see us. We are going to get started in 60 seconds. There we are, Karen, that's looking great. Okay, shalom and welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for this evening's Zoom presentation titled A Jewish Combat Photographer in World War II with our very own Karen McQuillan. My name is Rabbi Zalman Mendelson, and I serve as the co-director of the Chabad Jewish Center of Wyoming together with my wife, Razy, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all joining us here for this special evening's virtual presentation. As you know, we love to do events here at Chabad of Wyoming during this time when people are separate and quarantined to bring us all together in a state of unity, and it's very important to me and to our community that you know that you're in our thoughts and prayers each and every day. And when we do these events, we're doing them special for you, so you have the opportunity to be able to connect with fellow human beings and friends in the community. As you all know, we are now at a very difficult time in our history. We are at a difficult time throughout the entire world, but particularly here in Jackson with cases rising and the challenges that are going on in our community. Now more than ever, it is important that we gather together for these types of events, and we encourage each and every one of you who are on this Zoom together with us to consider making a one-time tax-deductible contribution to the Chabad Jewish Center of Wyoming at jewishwyoming.com/donate so we can continue to support our community during this time. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure, and it's a special honor to welcome Karen to share with our community personal photos that her father took during World War II as he fought with the US forces on the front lines during pretty much every battle in World War II. Please put your hands together and give a warm Chabad welcome to Karen McQuillan.
Thank you, thank you. So I have a lot of things to share. I'm going to try to move quickly through it. Please, this is a small group. It can be very informal. Jump in if you have a question. So I want to start by just reminding you what things were like back in the 40s. TV had not been invented. The war was not something that happened far off that didn't affect people at home. The entire country,
Whoops.
and what in small ways and in large ways. People were growing vegetables in their own backyards for food. They were doing without normal clothing that they were used to. Girls were going off to work in factories and heavy labor. And the only way that the public back home could find out what was happening in the war on the front was by newsreels that they would show in the movie theaters before the feature films would begin. And the Army took this very seriously. It was part of the war effort to keep up morale and keep people informed. And so they created a signal corps and they trained photographers to accompany the troops. And my father was trained as a motion picture cameraman. And the films that he took for the Army were shown to the public in the movie theaters. However, he had a still cameraman assigned to him through the whole war. And his still cameraman was taking pictures of my dad. And then later my dad also had a still camera. And for himself, as home souvenirs, he took pictures. And what you will see are the photos that he took and that were taken of him during the war. He never talked about them. I found them when I was cleaning out his apartment when he was moving to an assisted living place. Just contact sheets stuffed into a little Rolleiflex box. And they were such high quality because they were taken with a Leica that I was able to digitize them. And that's what you will be seeing. Now, how did my dad come to be a combat photographer? He had immigrated with his family from communist Russia at the age of 9 in the 1920s and was a kid in the Bronx. And he just hung out with the kids, playing stickball on the street like everybody else. But one of the older brothers happened to be a kid named Robert Capa. And for any of you who know anything about photojournalism, Capa went on to be the giant in war photography from before World War II and after. And he trained the whole gang of kids in darkroom techniques. So here's my dad as a teenager. And he was taking pictures of New York and taking pictures of the New York World's Fair. And then one day he was with his friend. This is actually a key part of the story. He was walking with his friends in Times Square with the cameras around their neck, and a man came up to them and said, do you want girls? And they were like, what? And he said, do you want girls? I can supply you with girls, models. And this guy ran a burlesque theater, and he would give the burlesque girls a job, an opportunity to pick up a little extra money. These teenagers would take them up to the Bronx to their mother's apartment when their mother was out and take pictures of them in the apartment with not too many clothes on and sell them to these magazines. Okay, time goes on. And Pearl Harbor happens. And as my father explains, he says, my experiences in World War II, I would say, started way before Pearl Harbor because I was extremely anti-fascist. And I knew somewhere along the way we would have to fight everything that was happening before it. So after Pearl Harbor, I went to volunteer in the Army, even before most of my friends. I did basic training at Fort Hancock, New Jersey. We were in pup tents on the beach. We would get up and run into the water. It was cold. There was a ferry from that beach to the Battery in Manhattan. And if we had leave, we'd jump on the ferry and could take the subway home. So he's still in New York. He's still a Bronx kid. Then they transfer him to the Signal Corps, and there was an old Paramount film studio in Astoria, and the Army turned it into a training camp. William Holden, the actor, was there as a lowly private. But on Friday nights, when all the soldiers were lined up to get their paychecks, Holden would walk by to be picked up by a waiting limo, and all the soldiers would tease him and razz him, but he didn't need to bother picking up his paycheck. Well, they got their training, and they were loaded onto the Queen Elizabeth in the summer of 1943. As my father describes it, 6-day crossing, no convoy, 20,000 soldiers on that ship. We slept in 8 shifts. We had the shelves for 3 hours. You didn't sleep on the shelf, you slept on the stairwell or any place you could get room. It was a great big crap game from beginning to end. Dice, cards, but mostly dice. And a friend, I love this photo of my father looking out at the porthole and wondering what they're going to. And this is what they were going to, the Blitz. And they were in London for a while and taking pictures, and then they went out to Tavistock in Cornwall. You can see civilian life in England was over. And they were training for D-Day. As my father said, we started to rehearse for the invasion, and that was our major thing for a year. A lot of practice, maneuvering, taking pillboxes, climbing hills, waterproofing our vehicles. The first time they waterproofed the Jeeps, they drove them down to the beach and into the ocean, they all sank. They didn't have it right yet. I have so many pictures of practicing every day in England. I was in training myself. My job was to photograph the invasion. We rehearsed taking a pillbox. We would be right next to them, and goddamn, the rocks would be flying. I served under General Cota. If you remember Robert Mitchum in the movie The Longest Day, that was General Cota. Cota knew me by name because when he went someplace and wanted pictures, I went with him. And the poker games and everything else went on. This is a stock photo, not one my dad took. Eisenhower, Omar Bradley, Montgomery, they came to Tavistock to plan D-Day, and my father filmed them all for newsreels for the folks back home. Now he had an interesting experience because one of the generals liked to go to parties at Lady Astor's stately home. Now, Lady Astor was a Nazi sympathizer. Churchill hated her, as you can see from this slide. So my father describes, Lady Astor ruled Plymouth like a queen. Almost every weekend, General Gerhardt was invited for dinner being 200 people. I would be asked to go quite often to take pictures of the general with personalities, sometimes with General Cota too. I saw many prominent people, and I got mad as hell at Lady Astor. She was a leader of the pro-Hitler Cliveden set, and she was berating a free Pole, a Pole who had come out of Poland to warn the world about what was happening. I don't remember the battlefield situation, but she carried on for about 15 minutes, and the poor guy was standing almost at attention. We followed the war very closely. I remember being very excited about Stalingrad, an enormous victory for our side. That was the beginning of the end for the Nazis in the East. And it turns out that after the war, this general was demoted to colonel, which is almost unheard of because he was very careless with the lives of his men. So this was an interesting thing I found. The headquarters did intense, detailed quality control. Every bit of film that was taken was sent to headquarters and looked at, and then feedback was sent back to the photographer to bring them up to snuff. And I'm very proud of this one because the comments below say, this subject was handled as well, if not better, than any professional newsreeler. The coverage was excellent and initiative shown by the cameraman commendable. Not to be critical, the only fault I found was a little too much headroom in one or two of the close-ups. Keep up the good work. And then it was signed by the captain with the note, I heartily concur in the above. So the next thing that happened was Normandy.
I have a question.
So my dad describes D-Day, and his voice would always shake when he told this, so mine's going to shake too. As a soldier, we didn't know when the invasion was going to come. There was the feeling that there was such a buildup of American forces. All of a sudden, you are almost elbow to elbow with American forces in this island. They were coming over by the boatload, and it was more and more of a buildup. And then one day we said, all right, pack everything, get on the trucks. We got on the trucks in a convoy, and we went this way and that way. I still get a chill. As far as I could see along the country roads, piles of munition. The people came out to watch, and they were silent. They knew what was happening. No cheering. You could just hear the trucks moving. We didn't talk. The only talking was maybe, you got a cigarette? The emotion, the realization of what was happening. We went to Torquay, which was where we got on the boat. We weren't gung-ho, no, we were scared because we weren't experienced. We didn't know, hadn't been under fire, war was still movies. I remember feeling, at last we're going after Hitler. I was happy because this would open up the second front and end the war and end Hitler. I wasn't happy, ha ha, but it was very emotional. We all knew. I and a couple of other guys I was close with said, oh boy, this is it. On the truck that night, we were told where we were going. We were going to Normandy. They gave us maps. They told us exactly where we were going to land, what our objective was, where every yard was marked off on the map. And it was actually a map of all of Europe, and it showed them ending up in Germany. So this was also to help the soldiers put themselves in context and be aimed at their goal. We got on the boats that night and fell asleep. I was on a small boat with an artillery on an OST. The next morning, we first saw where we were. We were not close to shore. We were surrounded by an armada of 10,000 ships. We just couldn't believe it. Then there was a reading on the ship of Eisenhower's proclamation, order of the day, what we were supposed to do to invade this and that. We heard all sorts of rumors that things were not going well on the beach. We didn't go in when we were supposed to, and I started to notice small speedboats bringing wounded back to certain ships. And some wounded were brought to my ship. I begged my captain, finally got permission to go back with the boat. I had to promise I wouldn't go on the beach. He said, you can't land yet without your unit, so only if you come back. But I did go on the beach, and we brought back wounded. The beach was practically empty because everyone was lying down and they were up against the hedgerows where they did not break through yet. So I got some pictures of the wounded being put on, and I went back to my ship, and we didn't land until late that day. This is stock footage, not my dad's, but this was the scene that he was seeing. And this is his photo as his ship landed. And this is a little out of order, but a lot of people died on that beach. And they did do special graves for Jewish soldiers. And this is this kind of story that my father was told while I was growing up. It was the funny stories, how they changed all the signs on the railroad station saying London and New York and stuff. You know, goofing around, but this was the other side of the war, because right after Omaha, the next battle was St. Lo, which was a horror show. St. Lo, my father's division got to St. Lo first, and because the weather changed, no one else arrived to back them up. So they were alone there for a week. And it was hand-to-hand fighting. They were against very seasoned German elite troops, and they didn't know what they were doing at all. And it looked for a moment like it was going to be the end before we'd even begun. But my father's memories are this. He said, in the Battle of St. Lo, we were under such heavy artillery fire, I was afraid to stand up. I was crawling in a tank rut, and I knew I'd be hit any minute. You felt like every shell was coming straight at you. There was a French bomber's body in the trench, and I crawled right over it. Then all of a sudden I hear, "You can't get pictures that way, soldier." I look up, and it's General Cota. He's walking along, but he got hit by shrapnel in the soldier, and an hour later, I was taking pictures of him getting a medal. So 11,000 Americans were killed in this single battle, including my father's still photographer, the man on the left. Here they are celebrating with some champagne they liberated, but they were just standing in an alley, and a Jeep was hit in front of them. My father ran to pull the soldiers off the burning Jeep, and Heinrichs was hit with shrapnel and just dropped dead at his side, and that was the end of that. And then they continued to fight through Normandy, through the hedgerows, and playing poker in empty barns. My father has one of his favorite stories was their first night in a barn in Normandy. One of the soldiers went to fill his helmet with water to wash his face in the morning. It was Calvados, and he called out whiskey, and everyone got drunk. And they did see some of the major sites like Mont Saint-Michel, but not as tourists. It was a Nazi listening post, and they got it. Well, next thing, they're rolling into Paris. And here's my father's description of the liberation of Paris. The road was open to Paris. We stopped for the 2nd French. Eisenhower thought the 2nd French Armored Division attached to the American Army should have the honor of marching in and taking Paris. So we were off now to Paris, and every photographer in the Army, no matter where they were, attached themselves to the 2nd Army Division. We were advancing 20, 30, 40 miles a day, and there was nothing to hold us back. And the only thing in front of us was Paris. I hooked up with Robert Capa again, who was there he wasn't in the army, he was working for the Herald Tribune. And we came to the town of Rambouillet, and there was Ernest Hemingway with his own private army of Free French marching them up and down. It was so unbelievable what the scene was, right in the middle of French soldiers. They were screw-ups. Sorry, Zalman. Because I remember that night before we were driving into Paris, they were driving with all their headlights on. And we're like, "You don't do this. It's still war. You'll get us killed." Finally, we got into Paris, and on both sides of the street, French lined the streets, and French tanks lined up like a convoy. They were firing point blank down towards the Place de la Concorde because there was still resistance going on there. And I'm behind one of the tanks getting pictures of people cheering and the tanks firing. And I know, because I'm experienced by now, that if a tank is firing, somebody's going to fire back. So I got my pictures, and I left, and I went around the corner, and my officer went to the spot where I'd been standing and was killed. You have to get streetwise, battle-wise. You're there, you do a job, and you get out. Then I went into the Place de la Concorde, and there were thousands of people there, and someone started to throw fire again. And this 300-pound woman grabs me and falls down on top of me, and I'm trying to get up. And finally the fire stopped, and that was the liberation of Paris. And he says, "Paris was so beautiful. The French people were beautiful. The whole world was beautiful. The weather was fine. We were beating the bastards. We were winning the war. We were alive, and it was beautiful." And they proceeded to celebrate by picking up girls and other funny stories. And then they continued on through Holland. The army was very interested in getting these sort of heartwarming shots of the soldiers playing with kids and civilians. This is a behind the scenes shot of the men stopping to relieve themselves on convoy. And so this postcard says, the Hubrechts family in Belgium, they were most kind to me. I went into an attack on the back of a tank, and he says fumes. Actually, sand got into his eyes and he became temporarily blind, and he was left behind. and these two people took them in. So this is from a history book. The First Army was the first to break the Siegfried Line in September 1944. I didn't know about this. For 3 years before the war, Hitler had fortified the border with Belgium and France. He put in 22,000 bunkers and pillboxes, 30 kilometers deep. And in 1944, as the Allies approached, 360,000 German civilians were put to work digging trenches. It took 6 months and 250,000 casualties for the Allies to break through. 2 million American soldiers fought in that battle, and it was all in small units. And many of the casualties, like my dad, were taken in and cared for by local families. So this is actually a common experience. That's a cadaver of a Nazi in front of the tank. So my father wrote a wonderful Nazi because he was a dead Nazi. So this is called the Battle of the Bulge because the Germans broke through the American lines, pushing them back, creating a bulge shape, if you will. It was Hitler's last stand, Germany's greatest counteroffensive. More than 1 million Americans were in this fight. Losses from exposure to the cold equaled the losses from fighting. And again, the people of the Ardennes opened their homes to American soldiers. They shared food, blankets, and fuel, helped the wounded and the ill. There were 81,000 American casualties, 23,000 captives, and 19,000 fatalities. These are some pictures my dad took. They passed New Year's there, and he wrote, "Our New Year's toast, the smiles are false, for we weren't a bit happy that night." And then my father got a few days off and went to this inn in the Ardennes. He returned to battle, and the next day the Nazis moved through, and the GIs who were still there ended up in the prisoner of war camps. But for the soldiers, it was important to get a break from the front lines in the snow and get a bath, get to have some coffee and sing. That's my dad in the middle. And then back to the snow. And then finally they broke through and they got to the border with Germany. This is the Remagen bridgehead, March 1945. The US Army found the bridge mined for imminent demolition, and in the face of heavy fire, the infantrymen rushed across the structure that was wired to explode at any second, seized the surrounding high ground, and we were in Germany. We got across. And I think this is the first real smile. And all the other bridges had been destroyed. So that bridge was important. Another important battle, this was the final defeat of the German army. The same German army that my dad's division fought at Omaha Beach was destroyed in the Ruhr Pocket. Americans took 325,000 prisoners. They liberated camps. This is a Russian slave labor camp. The women are well fed because the Germans were using them to raise food, and they were very grateful. This is a list. The Army created lists of every single reel of film and shot and scene that my dad took throughout the war. And it was only in going through his papers when he was 94 that I discovered that he was at the liberation of Dachau because it was listed. And he had told my mother, but he never talked about it again. He couldn't. These are, the men in the pit are German soldiers who were being forced to look for bodies that were hidden there. of Russian slave labor that they had starved to death against, all decency. VE Day, May 1945, unconditional surrender of German forces on all fronts. They don't really look that happy, and they just got stinking drunk. And then there they were in Berlin, which was just a site of unbelievable destruction. As some of you may know, the American army halted 50 miles from Berlin to leave the capture of Berlin to the Red Army. And the Red Army really earned their seizing it. 500,000 Soviet troops launched the final assault. Infantry, tank, and flamethrower platoons blasted the resistance in the city. They fought block by block, hand-to-hand fighting. 125,000 Berliners were killed. Every German woman in the city was raped. The cost to the Red Army was terrible. 305,000 casualties. So by the time the US Army got there, this is what it looked like. And the American soldiers crawled all over the German war equipment, and they visited the Russian zone. And this is the Russian army returning to Russia. They didn't even have trucks. They were on foot. And my father said it was like watching the Asian hordes. It just went on and on and on. And then Churchill, Truman, and Stalin came for the Potsdam Conference and reviewed the troops. Here's President Truman reviewing the troops. And they made a deal. They expelled the German population from Eastern Europe. They divided Germany and Berlin, and they issued the ultimatum to Japan for immediate unconditional surrender or to face, quote, prompt and utter destruction. One last card game, and back to New York. And many years later, when my father was in his mid-90s, and I had discovered these photos, I called the Museum of the City of New York, and I said, I have these amazing photos from the war. And the curator almost fell off her chair because she was planning this show, World War II in New York City, of New Yorkers in the war. And she knew all about the Astoria Film School. She had never met a veteran. So they interviewed, that's my dad at age 94 in his nice suit in front of the exhibit. And there he is as a young man with his camera. And they did a whole exhibit on his work and on him. Those are his photos. And there's my husband listening on the kiosk to the video interview they did with my dad. There he is. And that's the scene of Astoria. And people gathered around, and it was so wonderful because they would come around and they'd look at the photo, and then they'd see my father and they would recognize him, and this look would come over their face. And then he talked for hours. He stood there, I think, for 4 hours talking nonstop and really having a ball. And there he is. So
Wow.
I'm going to stop my share, right, Zalman?
Yes, please.
Yeah. And now,
Karen, that was phenomenal. That was so interesting. The pictures were great, and the stories and all of the diaries that he wrote related to the stories, absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing that. I see that we have some questions in the chat box, one from Gary Gertner. Did they develop their own film? Gary, would you like to elaborate on your question? Feel free to come on mic if you want to elaborate on your question to ask Karen directly. You wrote, did they develop their own film?
I think
no,
that's
the film would be sent back just behind the front lines. And it was developed there because they couldn't have a dark room in the battlefield conditions.
so the proof sheets were all processed behind the lines.
Yes, at the headquarters building and then sent back up to the front.
Oh, so your dad could see what he shot.
Oh yes, they saw it, you know, in real time because they wanted to keep up the quality control. They really wanted professional level film because this was going to be shown to the public back home.
Did he go to the Pacific at all? Did he go to the Pacific at all?
No,
Only Europe.
only Europe.
Gary, thank you for the excellent questions. Anyone else have questions for Karen about her presentation, which was phenomenal? Please just open up your mic. No need to be formal here.
Karen, did your dad share any of these escapades with you while you were growing up, or did this all just occur?
So I
later
heard
in
the
life?
funny stories. I heard about finding the whiskey. I heard about
So is that a game you played at home, or?
I heard about going to Maxime's, which is one of the fanciest
Yeah,
restaurants
sure.
in Paris. And he and his buddy walked in, and the waiters were in their tails, and they, were so excited, GIs, and they sat them down, and they whirled all around them, and they brought up a silver trolley with a big silver dome, and they pulled it off, and there was a little naked plate of spaghetti without any sauce on it because they didn't have any food. So those were the stories he told me. My husband John is a World War II buff. So he started asking my dad like guy questions about battles and this and that and the generals. And then that started him talking. And then we sat down with him and we did this oral history, Zalman. So it wasn't a diary at the time. John and I interviewed my father and got these memories. And then we showed him the pictures and got him to tell us more looking at each photo. So it was a wonderful thing to do.
Incredible. Any other questions, please? Feel free to just open your mic and ask away.
A great piece of history.
What a great piece of history, Razy says. Steve, Heather, Darcy, Elon, Zalman, go ahead. Unmute yourself and ask any questions you have. Karen, could you talk a little bit about any more information you have or any photos you have regarding the liberation of Dachau?
I don't have any photos of that. And as I said, I didn't even know that my father had had that experience. The only time I saw him mention it was when he was a very old man and he broke down in such sobs, his whole body was shaking, and he said, "I'm sorry to be weak," and he couldn't finish, he couldn't talk. It was just something too much to bear, really.
Wow.
Do you have any
I can
plans?
tell you another part about being Jewish in the army, though, which is that the first army he was with was from Virginia, and they were a lot of country boys. They'd never seen a Jew, and they were, they were not comfortable with Jews, and yet at the same time, the Signal Corps had quite a few New Yorkers in it. My father had two of his best friends from the Bronx who were also in the Signal Corps and went on to become life photographers. One of them was Ralph Morse, who's the man who photographed astronauts. Every astronaut photo you ever saw, starting with Sam Shepard, was taken by another one of this crowd of kids from the Bronx. Another one of them started
Karen, you're
photography in
breaking
New
up a
York
little
City.
bit.
Another one of the kids started the Museum of Photography, the big museum of, I think it's called the Center of Photography in New York. So, hi, Leon.
Darcy, did you have a question? You started asking. Go ahead. Unmute yourself, Darcy, and go ahead and ask your question.
Do you have any plans to compile these things together in a book or something? I may have missed it if you said so.
I have made a beautiful photo book with the pictures and the words, and I sent it to agents in New York. I tried to get interest in it. Nada. What can I say?
We have.
I thought I should probably just publish it myself and sell it, but it's, publishing a photo book is very expensive, and it becomes an expensive item. It's been a bit daunting to do, but I feel like people would love it if they could see it.
It's wonderful work. Thanks.
We have a
Thank you.
copy of the book in our house, at least a bunch of those photos, and it's absolutely incredible, the photos. Leon, did you have something you wanted to say?
Have you thought about using blurb or something like that?
That's how I published it by something similar to Blurb.
Okay.
Yeah. But you
Elon,
know, like there's a big World War II museum down in New Orleans, and they sent a man up to New York who interviewed my dad for 6 hours. So all of his stories have been captured for history by the Army and are available to scholars.
Elon, questions? Leon, questions? Comments?
I'm surprised there's no Army archive that would want to have that.
The Army does have the original footage, and I'm going to make more efforts to get a hold of it.
Yeah,
I tried a long time ago, and it was difficult, but I think it would be easier now.
when there's so much raw material, nobody
Yes.
goes to the effort to put it together as you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
So that's an opportunity. Thank you.
Steve, any comments or questions? Okay.
So I'll just tell you a little bit of what happened after the war, because that's sort of an interesting part of American history also. The economy was not great when the GIs came back, and my father very much wanted to continue as a motion picture cameraman. He could not get into the unions. The fact that you were a vet meant zip. It was a father-son union. It was closed. They would not let him in. He was really scrambling around for work. And he worked for a gossip columnist for a New York paper for a while, and he got to take pictures of people like Marlon Brando, which made another set of fun stories. And then he finally got a break, and he was hired by J. Walter Thompson. Now, some of you may know the Snake River Ranch is owned by the family that created J. Walter Thompson, which was the biggest advertising agency in the world at the time. It may still be, for all I know. And in the 50s, they didn't hire Jews, but they started to, and my father was the third one they ever hired, and it was a dream job. They gave him a studio that he was completely in charge in to experiment. It was the days they were learning how to do TV commercials. So my dad was on the ground floor, and he developed a lot of the approaches to doing TV commercials. He had all the big commercials that you saw in the 50s and many in the 60s. My dad did. He introduced the Mustang, for example, and to do that, they flew him to Tierra del Fuego, and he went up the Pan American Highway, which is not yet completed, going through sections on helicopter because they hadn't finished it through the jungle, all the way to Alaska, just because the copywriter had come up with the slogan, 40 days and 40 nights from, Tierra del Fuego to Alaska or whatever. So he traveled all over Europe doing TV commercials and had a very exciting life. Eventually had his own little company producing commercials, and continued to be an upbeat, cheerful, adventurous person right to the end. Hi, Heather.
Hi, so good to see you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to share this. It means a lot to me, and I feel like I'm in family, and it was very nice to share it with you all.
Thank you, Karen. If any one of us would like to get our hands on some more of the photos or get to see them, is there anywhere where you have them published? Is
Yeah,
there
just
anything-
email me. I'd be happy to send you anything.
Okay, awesome.
If anybody missed the beginning, it was recorded on Facebook, and anybody could go onto Facebook and watch the recording from the beginning.
Thanks, Leon.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you all so very much for joining us for this special evening. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. As some of you may know, this upcoming Tuesday, we're going to be hosting a presentation on investing during a pandemic. The following Thursday, next Thursday, and a week from today, we're hosting the Consul General, Israel's Consul General. And then on September 6th, we're hosting an Israeli minister who happens to be the first Haredi woman who is serving as a minister in an Israeli government to speak for our community. All of these events are free of charge. We hope you'll be able to join us for all of them. Thank you all for coming tonight. Have a wonderful evening. Let us put our hands together one more time for Karen. Thank you, Karen, very much for that.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Be well.
You too.
Take care.
See you next meeting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.